Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks with ADSR, and you are checking out a first look series on Synapse Audio, The Legend. It's a new soft synth that was released, and it is a Moog emulation or a mini Moog emulation. And we're going to more on that in a minute, but I want to get some of the specs and how much it costs out of the way. So The Legend sells for $99 USD. You can get it VST, AU, or for Reason. So it really hits every main DAW. And it is, like I said, it's a vintage emulated, hardware emulated soft synth, and it does sound really nice. And just to put that price point in perspective really quick, Monarch, which is the Native Instruments Reactor Ensemble, that is probably one of the most, I would say, tediously emulated Moog synths out there, that is $99. Then there is Arturia has a Moog synth as well, and I believe that's $149 typically. And then Yuhi Diva, which is kind of like the quintessential analog style synth for a software version, that's I think $179. So it's not the most expensive one. It's not the cheaper one. There are probably some cheaper ones out there. I think like GeForce Mini Monster might be cheaper. I think IK Multimedia has like a sample-based one, but I've never used those two. I'm just giving you information on the three that I have. And if we're comparing it to Diva, it's kind of an unfair comparison because Diva gives you the templates for like some like a Juno, like a 60 and a different types of synths and some Korg synths, and they give you different filters and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot more going on with Yuhi Diva. This is more of a direct comparison, or a direct competitor rather, to Monarch and to the Arturia style Moog emulations. So that being said, let's discuss more about what hardware unit this is actually emulating. And Synapse goes to great lengths not to say what it's emulated after, but it is modeled after a Moog synth, and more specifically, a Mini Moog Model D. And I think you can pick up one of those for just a shade under $4,000. So if you have an extra $4,000 laying around, go for the hardware version. But this is another Moog emulation. And when I first got wind of it and I first heard about it, I was kind of like, grumble, because like, how many Moog emulations do we need in a soft synth? And I gotta say, I was actually pleasantly surprised with the quality of this synth. For my Moog style sounds, I'll typically pull up Native Instruments Monarch, and I for some reason don't like reactor ensembles. I like Form and I like Monarch and I like Razor, but I just don't like working in Reactor, and I don't know why. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, well, that's stupid. Echo Soundworks, you're being an idiot, and that's fine. I mean, I'm definitely the minority there, but I do like the self-contained plugin element of The Legend, and it is much easier to use than an Arturia Mini Moog or Moog emulation. The GUI's a lot cleaner, the GUI's a lot nicer to use, and I actually like the sound a lot more. So let's speak of the sound. The sound sounds pretty damn close to a Mini Moog and the Mini Moog Model D. And I have played both of those at different studio sessions. And if you're wondering why there's this whole like lust and just kind of like this iconic cult status with the Moog and Mini Moog and other Moog style synths, it's because it just has a really musical sound. It was one of the first synths that was ever just musical. It just made sense for musicians, and it just sits well in mixes. That's why people pay so much money for it. I know it's quite basic. Usually they just are 3 oscillators, basic waveforms, that type of thing. But if it fits, it fits. I guess the best way to describe it would be it's kind of like the Les Paul, the Gibson Les Paul, which is an electric guitar, really famous electric guitar. It's the Les Paul of synths, essentially. And it just sounds good in music. The low end is great. So for basses, this thing sounds incredible. The original, the hardware unit does as well. And this has some punch to it, which I really like, and we'll check that out when we go through some of the presets. So the Legend, just kind of a quick overview of what it's going to be really good for. It's going to be great for basses. It's going to be great for monophonic leads. Polyphonic sounds, not so much, but it's going to be a great synth to add character to your mixes or your productions. Let's say you have a synth like Silent or Massive or Serum or even Dune 2. Those are pretty digital sounding synths, and that's fine. I love digital sounding synths. Serum, Massive, Silent are some of my favorite synths of all time. And sometimes it's nice to layer in with your like bass coming from Massive or Serum. It's a really nice texture in a production environment to layer in something that's more of a analog, modeled or emulated vintage synth, kind of like the Legend. So that's kind of where it's going to excel at. And I do want to talk about just some interesting features to it for those of you who know a good amount about Moogs. Synapse did add some new features to it to kind of bring it into the modern world, and some of them are cool, and I think some of them I'm like, you guys should have expounded on that just a little bit. The first thing you'll notice up here is that we have voicing modes, and the actual Moog that this is emulated after doesn't have that. So there's a unison mode, and there you have detune, effect, and spread with those unison voices, and you have a poly 4. You can play up to 4 voices polyphonically, which isn't in the original, and then of course the mono, which is kind of nice. And then the other thing that I like is there's actually some delay and reverb. Synapse makes some really good reverb. Like if Dune 2 has a great reverb algorithm. And I think this is really cool because some of the Moog emulations out there, they're so true to the source material that they lack reverb and delay. And I think that's a reason why I don't use those as much, because I have to pull up third-party delays, third-party effects, third-party reverbs, just to hear how it's going to sound in a spatial context. And sometimes it's just easier for me to go from a synth. And even though a lot of times I don't use the reverb within the synth, it's just nice to have that option, in my opinion. So there are some new features to the synth. It's not just a steadfast emulation of the Moog, but what is heavily emulated are the oscillators and the filters. The filters in the Moog, the original Moog, the Model D, they used a special type of ladder filter that just had a really nice musical sound, and those are quite nicely emulated. I gotta say, this is one of the best emulations of a Moog I've ever heard. So that being said, we're gonna break, and you guys can check out the next video in this series where we're gonna be talking about the various controls of the synth. I'll see you guys there.